Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I am smiling from ear to ear right now because I have my very, very, very good friends with me, and we have 3 RDs in addition to myself. So it's a powerhouse of 4 RDs that are going to give you some real advice. So you might have known them before if you've been following for a while. About a year and a half ago, I can't believe it, during the height of the pandemic, we got together and we provided a free online what was it? Like a nutrition webinar series.
I have such fond memories.
It was like, it was a great day. It was a summit. It was a virtual summit. I loved it. And it was amazing and it was incredible. And we keep saying we're going to get together. It's always so hard, but we actually had the pleasure of being together more recently. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second. But one of our friends, Andres, who's here today, just got married. And so we got to see each other together. So that was super fun. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this conversation because it's going to be friendly, genuine, but also educational and informative. So I trust these guys with my absolute heart and soul. So I'm super excited for you to learn from all of us today. So without further ado, let's just do a quick little intro. I'm going to just go in the version of my screen. You guys can't see this, so you know you're listening in. But Alix, why don't you introduce yourself and each of you kind of share what you're up to, where people can find you. Hopefully they listen to the full episode, but if they want to have a question they need to ask and they want to get it out right away, where they can contact you.
All right. Thanks so much for having us, Tony. This is so fun. My name is Alix, and I've been on your podcast a while back now, which I love. And you've been on mine too, so you'll have to listen to that if you haven't. But I work with mostly women. Actually started working with more men, which has been actually interesting to see. There are some differences in the way that my coaching goes, but I generally work with, I say weight management because it's not weight loss or weight gain or muscle gain. It's just learning to get to a place where you're just managing. And so for some people that is intentional weight loss, if they're in a place where they can do that. For other people, it's just working on their relationship to food. Usually that's part of all of my conversations and interactions with clients. But I don't really take a hard stance on too many things. I kind of like to say I see the nuance in most situations. And so I love personalized nutrition. And I am currently really working on making my group program better and better in a way where it's still personalized. So it's sort of a hybrid group program where there's some one-on-one attention and also lots of education and communication in a group. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And so Alix is really great at telling you all sides. She is so great at educating you on like what's in your food, what are the macronutrients, but like, what is that also, how does that apply to you? So I really, you have to follow her. Alix, what's your handle on Instagram?
It is Alix Turoff _RD.
Yeah, definitely worth a follow.
Alix with an I.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, Dez, you're up.
What's going on? So, Tony, thank you so much for the invite. I love seeing your guys' faces. I miss you so much. Yeah. My name is Dezi Abeyta. I am a dietitian, high performance mentor. I've kind of, and I think to a huge degree, we all do life coaching. So I think because it's so important because we can't not look at the other holistic points of how people interact with their behaviors without looking at the nutrition piece and looking at the mental health piece. So where I'm at now is I've stepped into a whole lot more life coaching, having experience with professional baseball and professional athletics. One of the things that I really loved about what these athletes were getting was they were getting a strength and conditioning component. They were getting nutrition from a dietitian. They were getting mental conditioning and mental health coaching through a mental health coach. And some of the other things that they were getting was a lot of sleep hygiene. So I sort of took those 4 pillars and created something for myself. And I think the more that I become more trauma-informed in my life and more trauma-informed just about behavior, I've really enjoyed teaching people a bit more about emotional agility and at the very base level of just releasing the stigma behind asking for help. I mean, anyone that we've ever worked with has been courageous enough to say, hey, I need help. I need a mentor. And we all get to do that and love what we do. So where I'm at now, I'm really enjoying it. You know, some of the other things that I've started to think about is stepping into more thought leadership. Tony, you and I have had a bunch of conversations about doing our TEDx talk, writing. You know, I rebranded my podcast, the Can't Believe I Made It podcast, and I'm having such a really great time with it. And I've had almost all of you on. Alix, you're the next invitation, my friend. But it's been so fun, and I get to literally create what I've always wanted to do, which is to help people and to let them know that it's okay to struggle with their emotional health and it's okay to ask for help. So I appreciate you having us on, dude. Yeah,
no, my pleasure. And go check out his new podcast. It's I Can't Believe I Made It, right?
Can't Believe I Made It. You can find on Instagram at I Made It Pod. Give us a follow. Come say what up.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Definitely asking for help. There's no shame in it. And until you ask for help, once you can't really elevate yourself, you can't be a high performer. You really can't thrive in life unless you get support. Eventually you're going to break and things are, we need the support. We need the guidance, and there's no shame in that. So thanks for what you do, Des. Yeah. All right, Andres, you're up.
The last time we were in the same room together, we had one too many drinks and we just went a little bit too much. So it's pretty excited to well, it's a different kind of setting, right? But yeah, so all you guys were in my wedding, so that was like a really fun time. But yeah, thank you so much for bringing us together once again. My name is Andres Ayesta. I'm a registered dietitian, nutrition coach, sports dietitian as well. So I have a company called Planos Nutrition. I rebranded this year from previously it was Vegan Nutrition. I think at some point like people knew it from there. And I'm also a host of a podcast called the Nutrition Blueprint Podcast. And really what we do is like we help mostly women, but just like Alix, a lot of times we also actually work a lot with men. So I feel like there's a lot of men seeking out for help lately, which is great. And we help them kind of get rid of that diet mentality and help them obviously achieve their goals by building what we call a blueprint for their health. Planos is a Spanish word for blueprints. And essentially what we're trying to help them do is create a blueprint for themselves so they can not only accomplish their goals, but also kind of create a model of coaching to kind of help them kind of change their lives in the process. We believe very similar to you guys in 4 key components into our programs. We believe in what we call nutrition mastery, lifestyle revamping, mindset shifting, and intentional movement. So that's kind of like the things that we preach and teach that can help and obviously kind of build that blueprint in the process through one-on-one coaching, group support, and all different things like that. So kind of similar to what all of you guys do, but the more the merrier, obviously helping a lot more people every day. So that's just a little summary of kind of what I got going on right now.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. And Andres, your passion is so obvious. He's recording now. He's in Mexico City and he's like, I'll hop on a podcast. Sure. Why not? Like he's just always chilling. Working, always ready to influence. It's just so awesome to see. So I thought actually we all brought up some really great components of that fact that when it comes to a healthier lifestyle, whether you have a weight loss goal, a weight management goal, a weight gain goal, fat loss goal, muscle gain, all that stuff. There are some foundational things that I think need to be put in place. But at the end of the day, we have to individualize it to us. So later today, I do want to talk about the whole concept of energy balance because it's been coming up a lot. I actually have, when this comes out, my book will be out. So I just realized like, when you guys are hearing this, Once Upon a Diet, awesome. Shameless plug, Once Upon a Diet on Amazon, you can go and buy it. And someone just recently messaged me about an article all about how the obesity epidemic is kind of skewed because of it's all based off of the science of energy in versus energy out. And I kind of shared with the person who sent that to me, shout out to Jen, she graduated from my program, a year ago. It was a great article. And I shared with her that in my book, I kind of talk about how, yes, energy balance does play a role. Except the thing that's missing is how far it will take you and like when it kind of stops working. And then we have to factor in all those other things that we were just talking about before, like all these other things that play into our nutrition and how our body functions. So we can't dismiss it completely, but it's also not the only thing that affects weight loss and weight gain. So I thought that it'd be a good conversation since we have 3 nutrition experts here. if you guys kind of wanted to kind of chime in on your thoughts on energy balance and when it comes to weight loss, like, is it true that if you overeat basically, or you take in more calories than your body burns, so you're in a caloric surplus, you'll gain weight? If you eat the same that your body burns, you'll maintain weight. And then if you take in less than your body burns, you'll be in a calorie deficit and you lose weight. So I would love for you guys to chime in on this conversation, because I think it's a really hot topic right now and definitely worth discussing.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of start on that. And is this the article that was written by I think it was like a dietitian, or that was actually
let me actually
because
see.
It's an article called it's called "The Calories In, Calories Out Concept is Tragically Flawed, New Research Suggests." I think that's the one that she may be referring to.
How a fatally tragical flawed paradigm has derailed the science of obesity.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Alan Aragon already kind of posted a reply on this, and yeah.
Oh, really?
I'm like ready to go, but
I'm so excited. Let's go.
I didn't see this article yet, so
I'm gonna send you. Sorry, I'm putting them on the spot. This was a last minute podcast idea. I just got this article this morning.
It's a great topic area, though.
I actually really like stat news too. By the way,
okay,
good. Oh, of course, it's Gary Taubes that tells me mostly what I need to know. But
I love that you guys. This is what real like scientists, registered dietitians, what they do before they come, which is why I probably should have sent it way before. My bad. I'm sending it to you guys in the group chat now. But this is what real registered dietitians do. That like we will read it first. We will see where the sources are. We see who wrote it. And then we gather that to be able to comment on it. We don't just see something and just believe it to be true. That's not a scientist. That's not someone who's gone to school, who understands that you need to read the research before you can comment, assess, and implement. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
So without reading it, I'm gonna give like my bias judgment of what I think this is going.
Yeah.
I think people like to say that it's not just about calories in, or it's not as simple as calories in and calories out, but it is a law of thermodynamics. Mm-hmm. That energy balance is a law of thermodynamics. It's like one of the very few things that we have proven. Now, calories out is what is so dynamic. Calories in, of course, is the food that we eat. But I think where people get confused and when they get angry is that we are not always paying attention to how many different factors impact calories out. Mm. So hormones, environment, genes, muscle mass, all of those things impact how many calories your body needs to lose, maintain, or gain weight. But that doesn't mean that energy balance isn't true. Mm-hmm. It just means that it's not so simple that we know. I could look at you and say, this is how many calories your body needs.
Right. Or that 3,500 calories equals a pound. And that means that if you have a deficit of 3,500 calories, your body's going to lose exactly 1 pound.
It would be almost impossible for anyone to measure 3,500 calories and to measure expenditure, because we just don't have the tools available to us. But theoretically, if we were able to monitor every single little thing down to like how our genes are impacting our hormones and our thyroid and all of this stuff, and how much we move and how much muscle mass is, and the thermic effect of food and all of this other stuff, and how much like fiber is even converted into calories, we don't have all of that information. Mm-hmm. So it makes it look like, oh, well, we have all these formulas and they're just baseless. They're not baseless, but they're just a lot more dynamic.
Mm. Yeah. And I would so this whole article, based on I haven't read it, but I actually read some of like the reviews done from, people that I trust to kind of give proper reviews. And essentially they're looking at the whole carbohydrate insulin model of obesity, right? So the CIM, which basically says that with, lower carbohydrates, the whole thing kind of points out to low carb diets. And essentially what they kind of suggested and they looked into is that, when you gather a specific amount of data to support the specific area and validate the hypothesis that you can actually lose more weight, like at a isocaloric state, isoprotein state, which means like when that's basically kind of controlled, and then you kind of like lower the carbs versus like higher carbs, the people that have lower carbs, regardless of the amount of calories, are going to lose more. And that has actually been like debunked a million different times, right? So it's essentially how you decide to actually package. By the way, this study is not a control intervention. It's just basically a research review. So it's just more about the interpretation of the media that they would have about this, which is, again, completely flawed. So it's not like, and one of like the conclusions that some of these guys actually were saying is like the calories in, calories out concept is not tragically flawed, it's tragically misunderstood. And I think that's the bigger kind of like issue that kind of happens in here. So we're always kind of trying to find something to explain the bias around something. You can totally kind of go and gather specific research to support some of that bias. But or obviously her research maybe could be like, okay, like there could be something in here, but it's just simply completely misunderstood, especially by the media, that they just basically kind of take the conclusion and say like, this is exactly what's going to be, which kind of leads to this entire kind of like grouping of people that would say, see, I told you, it's not about just calories in, calories out. Like Alix said, at the end of the day, it's, food is just food. It's going to go in the same place. It's going to be exactly the same energy. The calories out concept is really what kind of differs depending on the person that we're talking to. But it's a simple thermodynamical like law here that we're talking about in general.
Yeah. And I think also when it comes to like being misinterpreted in the media, I think just everybody just wants to take a side, or everyone just wants to know the answers, and they want it so badly to be one way or like so clear and cut. But like our bodies are beautifully complex and it's not so clear cut. And because of our environmental factors and because of stress factors, like there's so many things that come into play that it's just not that easy, which goes back to what I was saying earlier, what you all were saying earlier. It's really like there's some basic principles we could implement, which we will share with you today. But at the end of the day, you need to find how to individualize it to you and pay attention to your body. Your body's talking to you, right? So we want to take the science, but we also want to take real world application and do our own experiment kind of with our bodies and have it being, when it's talking to us, pay attention to that and kind of see and play and tweak along the way. It's a lot easier to do when you have a dietitian who guides you through it.
that part is hard though. Like, because when I think about it, I know a lot of people who are willing to die on that hill that it's just calories in, calories out. And I've always thought, kind of taking a step back, it's an incredibly privileged way to think about things, because by doing so, you're completely forgetting about marginalized communities and underrepresented communities where there is a lot of food scarcity and resource scarcity. So we oftentimes teach people about periodization, right? Going through like, what sort of period are you in your life and your body? But it's the same thing just with life. We're going to go through moments where it's high stress, where maybe we might find out that we're not interacting with stress or trauma or things like that in a certain way. So I've always just thought like, I wish it could be clear cut. I always tell my clients this all the time. Like, listen, if you have a clear cut way to do this, please teach me, because I'm going to go teach everyone else. I'm going to tell all my friends who are dietitians the same thing. It's not like that. It's incredibly complex. And just like you said, Tony, our bodies are beautifully complex, and so are our experiences. And so to die on that hill is one, for me at least, is one of privilege.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And it's also very true. It's very true, because not everybody has the ability to be able to perfectly like get their meals perfectly packaged to them and all the things that like can help with that process. But all right, so let's shift a little bit to, I think, if someone, we all agree in sustainable weight loss, right? If that's an appropriate goal. So first we have to make sure that the weight loss goal is appropriate. If so, we're going to teach someone how to do it in a way where they lose it slowly, but consistently over time, rather than a large amount and then gaining it back and kind of, going up and down on the yo-yo dieting scale, right? So that's what sustainable weight loss is a slow, progressive approach to losing weight and keeping it off. So that's when we talk about that. So I think we all agree that there's some component to a caloric deficit that does need to be put into place to help, but it's not as extreme as people think. And that's also not the only factor. Do we all agree on that? Does anyone want to say that they do? Or okay, so they're all giving thumbs up and waving their heads.
Well, the one thing I was going to say is I think that in order to lose weight, a caloric deficit has to be in place. How you create that deficit is super individual and almost like making money. Some people start with a trust fund. Some people have help from their parents. Other people, go to New York City private schools and don't have to worry about where they're playing sports after school or where they're getting their meals.
Great analogy.
But at the end of the day, we are all still sort of living in the same world where the same rules of economics apply. So we don't want to say to everyone, well, it's as simple as calories in, calories out, because that does dismiss people who are at a disadvantage, people who have like childhood trauma, people who have eating disorders, people who have all kinds of hormonal issues. We're not taking away from that, to me at least, when we're saying it's calories in, calories out. But at the end of the day, weight loss, in order for weight loss has to happen, that has to be at the base, how you achieve that. And for some people, it's easier than others, I guess.
1,000%. 1,000%. And that's kind of where I was heading to now. So thank you for clarifying that. And thank you for that great analogy. So so it's a component. It's a small component. It's a component. There's a lot of other factors that are going to make that a lot easier of a component. And it'll make, like I said, for some people, it's easier than others. So I thought it'd be a good conversation for us to talk today. And we'll maybe each give like an example of something that they can do that's not focusing on your calorie deficit, right? It's not focusing on the food, but it's something that's probably going to make that process a lot easier to adhere to. All right. And it could be food related. So like, I'll go with my first example and then we'll go. So for example, like the quality of your food, like if it's higher in fiber and protein, if you eat more fruits and veggies, drink more water, those are things that are going to help to stay in a calorie deficit without feeling starving, right? So the example I use in my book, is when I actually use Jordan Syatt's example when he does the Big Mac challenge. So actually, if you didn't hear that episode with Jordan Syatt, I don't even know what number it is. But if you read chapter 6 of Once Upon a Diet, hopefully you read the whole book. But if you want to just skip to chapter 6, you can go. But it's talking about how like he kind of, the quality of his food, he ate a Big Mac, which was like 500 and something calories. And then the rest of the day was like whatever he could fit to stay in that calorie deficit. Long story short, he lost the weight, but he was starving. He didn't have good bowel movements, right? Like it was so hard for him to do that. The only reason why he did it was because it was a 30-day challenge and he was, trying to prove a point, but it wasn't easy to adhere to because he was starving, because his quality of his food wasn't that rich. Like there wasn't enough fiber, there wasn't enough lean protein, there wasn't enough there to really help ease that process. So I would say for you, if this is something you're trying to achieve, focus on quality of food first and then worry about portions second. I think that's always like kind of a good first step. If anybody wants to add to that or kind of just go on and share maybe some other things that people can implement, go for it.
So I would say this is something I've been talking to a lot of our clients about, and I kind of have been talking a lot on social media, which is in order for you to figure out where to start to create that quote unquote deficit, you have to kind of figure out exactly what your baseline is. So what it's important for people to understand exactly what does their lifestyle looks like right now, right? What is your baseline? Let's say if you obviously start with somebody, and we call this, the progressions and the cost of leanness. What are the benefits and trade-offs, and what does the lifestyle look at different kinds of stage, right? To create a deficit, for example, for somebody that is like very low weight, very low body fat, and it's trying to obviously kind of step on a stage to compete in a bikini competition, right? The deficit that they need to require to obviously accomplish that comes at a bigger cost. Versus, for example, something that is somebody that is starting at like a 45%, body fat or like a very obese category, perhaps it's like making this like 2 small changes that is going to kind of go and like eliminate the soda every day, and then you already kind of create that calorie deficit according to that. So every single person has a different baseline, and you have to for people listening in, you have to determine exactly what that is. And when my clients, I typically break it down into lifestyle, like your nutrition and stuff. So what is like your baseline right now? How many days do you work out a week? Like 1 times a week and it's very inconsistent. What about movement? I sit in my chair all day. What about nutrition? How many days a week you actually eat out? This many days. How many times you actually cook at home? This many times. So you have this list and it's like, okay, this is your life right now. In this life, the benefits of this life is it's not really costing you anything because it's super easy to do. What are like the trade-offs? Like barely nothing. But the only thing that you're going to obviously kind of have from that is you're unhappy, you're all different things. So what is like how do you transition to the next stage to quote unquote create some of that deficit without you even thinking of your creative deficit, right? It's like, okay, like take one of those different areas and say like, what can you do a little bit more of? Or what can you actually take off or take out in order for you to be able to do that? And you say, okay, you know what? From these 14 meals that you're ordering from takeout, how about you actually break those down? And now instead of 14, you do like only like 8 or 6. I mean, the average meal in a restaurant will have anywhere between 800 to 2,000 calories, depending on where you go. So cutting that down and now replacing it with real food, you're automatically creating a calorie deficit before you even are mentioning the word calorie deficit to them for that person that is starting from that position to the other one. Other people will have a different baseline. They already kind of eat healthy. So how many of us, we've worked with people that come into us to say, like, but I eat clean and I eat so healthy and all those different things like that. Well, clearly you're not creating the calorie deficit that you create because probably of inconsistency. So your baseline is different. So perhaps for you to break that baseline is, okay, now we need to start maybe counting and maybe we need to start to obviously calorie tracking. So at least we understand what is it that you feel like obviously you're failing. Everybody's different, but it all starts with that because to create a calorie deficit will be, like Alex said, and you said, completely different for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. For some people, it's just a matter of, being more mindful, making small changes, making some small swaps. And I think most people can start there, but how far that gets certain people, like you said, Andres, like if they have like a larger weight loss goal, it'll probably take them a little bit further. But if they're just looking to lose like 5 to 10 pounds or like just to get leaner, that's only going to take, that's not going to help really. What they need is a little bit more, structured or individualized approach. So that's a really, really good point. What are some other things that are important for helping people to adhere to a calorie deficit without really having to focus on a calorie deficit, if that makes sense?
I would say, and I love the fact that we all say the same things. That's why I really love us as a friend group.
But we're also not going to not say if we just happen to, like, that's the thing. Like, but we'll also call each other out if we disagree with something, but we are aligned in our thinking just because like we read research, we work with clients. Like we just like have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. And I enjoy it too, because I remember I had a strength coach in high school that would constantly say this. And at the time I was like, crazy, like, what are you even talking about? But he had said, he's like, gentlemen, abs are made the other 23 hours of the day. And I used to think about that, like, what the hell does that mean? But now that I know what I know, I like to go a little bit more on the side of like, what's your overall routine? Namely, I like to tackle their routine and their non-exercise activity, and then start to take a look at their sleep. So if I can, and Andres, you sort of touched on this, and I think it's such a really valid thing to touch on. Like, hey, how do you spend your time? So if you're someone who is constantly sedentary, sitting down all the time, is there something, can you get yourself a stand-up desk? Can you go take walking meetings? For most of us who are working from home or maybe doing some sort of hybrid, can you start to get some of that activity out that is not just exercise oriented? And so I like to make sure that I help people to understand what their overall routine looks like. And then can we double up on some things to help you? So as you go on this walk, can you listen to an uplifting podcast, or can you listen to an uplifting book that might cause you to really dial into some of your stress relief? And then in looking at that too, it's like, hey, what does your sleep routine look like? Evidence-based training, EBT official had posted this a while ago, and it's something that I always think about. They had said, he's like, waking up for a 4 a.m. cardio session after sleeping 4 hours is like stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies. And I always think about that from the standpoint of routine. So things that I like to look at with most people is just like, what is your routine right now? And then just like what Andres had said, like, let's try to be realistic as we build some different lifestyle factors in that are going to help you in the long term. If in fact your goal is going to be creating a calorie deficit or creating fat loss. So I like to look a little bit more on the side of routine and helping them to do that consistently and also realistically too. That's a big caveat. Most people will probably overestimate what they want to do, and what their usual bandwidth is in the moment is not conducive to that. So I think it's such a huge thing.
It goes again to that cost of leanness, right? Like what's is the benefits and the trade-offs, right? It's like, like the 45% body fat, like, obese person may want to obviously look like, a freaking model, like within like, a specific 6 months, or perhaps even like not necessarily that, but still very unrealistic expectations to kind of get to this point. So I'll show you sometimes pictures like, okay, so this is what you want to look like, right? It's like, yes. Like, look at all like the trade-offs and the cost and the sacrifices you had to make to be able to kind of get to this point, and look at all the steps that you had to take, right? Mm-hmm. So like, and what typically most, and this is a good point here too, to also to make, like, because obviously the diet industry is just more, focus on the calorie deficit through extremisms, right? So it's like, the detox, the juicing, the stuff. It's like you're going to take from a person from 2,500 calories, 3,000 calories plus on a daily basis to now obviously are getting now 1,000 calories or 900 calories into this like freaking, Optavia packaged meals with this like prolonged thing, or like this juice detox, or whatever may be the case. You're clearly creating a dramatic calorie deficit that people don't even understand that they're doing, right? But now they're obviously kind of, preaching and saying like, this program worked for me. No, dude, like this program didn't work for you because like, it was this program. It was because obviously the restriction that they created for you, right? So it helped you obviously kind of jump some hoops that you didn't have to kind of like work through. But then guess what? A month later, when you're not really doing your Prolon, or you're not obviously kind of getting your meals, good luck with that. Right. Yeah, so that's a typical thing that happens. And I think that's like the unrealistic expectations of what they have, because as a society that's what's led to believe that that's exactly the way to do things. It's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. Alex, I see you shaking your head. Go ahead.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think so. One very basic thing that I usually start with my clients, and of course, again, it depends on the person, is just getting into a routine of eating through the day. So before, and I always say, like, for me, I like to work a little bit more structured before we get intuitive, because for my clients, a lot of them need that first. So taking the guessing game out of, should I eat now? Should I not? I'm going out to dinner later. Maybe I don't eat a snack. Maybe I do. Just let's eat every few hours, breakfast, lunch, dinner, definitely an afternoon snack, maybe a morning snack, depending on your needs, probably an after dinner snack. And let's look at what that looks like so that they know that these meals are there for them. And then can we be aiming for 20 to 30 grams of protein at each of those meals? Done. Yeah. To start with.
I think that, sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. And then we build on it. Once they have that down, then it's like, okay, you're getting the 20, 30 grams of protein. Let's focus on fiber sources. What are the fiber sources? How can we work those in? Colors? How can we work in the fun foods that you want? Working on all of that stuff comes after, but even just getting into a routine, usually what then that eliminates is the grazing on random things because you don't have a plan, or overeating at a meal because you're starving, or not having energy to get your workouts in. So I think like it starts to, once you start fixing one thing, whether it's that or it's sleep, that's going to fix a lot of problems around it. And then you have less to fix. So like you start with the basics, let that fix as much as possible, and then go in and do like little detail work.
100%. I think so many people are in a rush to get to their goal that they miss the very foundational things and then are upset and frustrated when things don't work out. Yeah. And it's because you didn't take the time to build that foundation. Very similar, going back to like Alex's example of like financial wealth and financial growth. Like if you're trying to save money, you don't start by saving loads of money, especially maybe if you're start out in your career, right? You start by a little bit, then as you start to progress in your career, you get a raise, right? And you might start to, put in a little bit more, and then you start to like build up momentum, and then you're like, oh man, I got this. And then you almost like don't even think about it, right? So that's what we need to do in our nutrition. First, focus on healing your relationship with food, building a solid foundation, fueling your body, eating more nutrient-dense foods, and allowing yourself to get to this place where you can clearly identify the difference between physical hunger and psychological hunger, right? So like what Alix is saying is like most people probably aren't eating enough during the day or not eating, quality rich foods, right? So if you can really shift to eating just 3 balanced meals a day, getting the nutrient content up a little bit more by adding either fruit or a vegetable, a healthy fat, a lean protein, whatever that is, maybe all of them. Then you do that consistently, then you can clearly identify that when you are kind of wanting something late at night, that it's either a craving, maybe because you're PMSing, maybe you're stressed out, or maybe it's just because you haven't had it in a while. And then now you can think about having that food without considering it off limits and start to incorporate these foods that you may have previously labeled as bad in a way that really just you feel satisfied with, because you are fully satisfied physically, and because you're sleeping better, you're more satisfied emotionally. You just start to feel better. And then when you feel better, you do better. And that's how you stay in that positive cycle of behavior change and habit stacking. And that's really what's going to shift things for you. So our whole purpose here of wanting to have this conversation today is wanting you guys to work smarter instead of harder. A healthy lifestyle is not as complicated as it's perceived to be. If you truly just implement some very foundational things like getting more sleep, drinking more water, eating balanced meals, and you have that as a solid foundation, it's going to be a lot easier for you to make some shifts. So whether that's on your own or when you're working with a dietitian, it's going to be easier. And also in the long run, if your goal is weight loss, whatever you lose, it'll actually stay off rather than you constantly just going up and down. And it almost feels like you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think it's the small things first, focus. I think the other day I saw this, I went to church and they did a really cool kind of analogy, right? I'm sure you've seen this before, right? So you take this big vase or something, or a glass vase, right? And then what they started doing is they started adding a lot of sand into it, right? And then okay, a lot of times when we think about nutrition and all our goals, and obviously they did it in a spiritual type of way, but I kind of converted it into our things, right? So when we start to focus in let's say sand, pebbles, and big rocks, right? And we start to fill up that specific kind of base, what happens if we basically try to fill it up with sand, and sand is going to be the specific diet and all the details. A lot of times we focus the deficiencies that I have, that I need to get this vitamins, that I need to get this much, and all that kind of stuff like that. And we start to focus on the small things. A lot of times, they're not going to represent bigger things. There's not going to be a whole lot of space for the pebbles and the rocks to actually put it on top. Now, if you start to focus on the bigger things and you put the rocks first, the foundational pieces, it's going to be consistency. It's going to be obviously, drinking enough water, doing this thing. So focus on your sleep. You now are able to kind of put also now the secondary things, which are going to be maybe your pebbles. There's going to be more okay, I need to track my calories. I need to make sure I get enough protein. And then at the very top, you're going to be able to put the sand, and you're going to be able to fit everything in there, sand, pebbles, and rocks, in the same container that you first couldn't actually fill with just sand, because you focus on things that were not that important to you at the beginning. So people right now, they focus on so many different silly things before starting on their foundation, because that's what they see other people do. The tracking every single ounce of food. If you're starting at such a high percentage of body fat or obesity category, terrible habits, do you really think that the difference between eating, getting 150 grams of protein, 160 grams of protein is going to make a difference? It's not, right? For you, it's actually going to be kind of creating those habits. And so focusing on the big rocks and the pebbles before you start adding sand to your own personal life base, I guess you can call it.
I love that.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. Any other things we want to add?
I mean, the only thing that I would add in too, I sort of mentioned the bandwidth piece. I don't know what your all's take on this, having worked with a bunch of people. What I tend to find in most cases is that people are really hard on themselves, and they hold themselves to an expectation that in most cases is not very realistic. And then they find themselves in these really stuck shame spots where it's well, why can't I get this done? I'm unworthy. I'm unloved. And it kind of goes back to just throwing a huge dose of empathy and some self-compassion, because when I work with someone, right away, I try to be very realistic with them and also try to match up the things that they want. And Andres, I love the analogy with the big rocks and the little and then the sand. Some of the big things that they want, some of the high level things that they want to do, they just might not be there yet, because we need to build a foundation. I don't care about your quality of food if you're not sleeping very well and you're not handling your mental health very well. Let's talk about that stuff. And then I can teach you about how to break down your macronutrients. And then I can teach you about some of the other vitamins and minerals that you might need or maybe need to supplement. You know, I like to help people to be realistic. What up, Oliver?
Yeah, we have a period you guys can't see, but Oliver, Alex's dog, he's smiling,
telling me he's ready for dinner right now, and it's 2 o'clock. It's not even 2 o'clock.
It's like it's lunchtime.
He knows he's hungry.
Maybe just need a nap.
He knows his hunger cues. Yeah.
But so the last thing I was also going to add on here too is, and we recorded you mentioned the word self-compassion test, and I think it's we recorded a podcast on this too, which is like a lot of times people don't understand why they want what they want. Right. Yeah. So like it's understanding, okay, like you want to lose this amount of weight. And I was now asking on all of our calls to like our potential clients, I was like, okay, why do you want this? And how is your life going to be different when you actually achieve that goal? Right. What is that 2.0 version of you look like? And why do you want to obviously achieve that? Right. Because when you start to learn that, because here's what happens a lot to a lot of us, right? Sometimes like we get to the goal and we realize that it's not as fulfilling, as exciting as we thought it was going to be when we got to it, right? And this happens a lot of times when we're trying to make a specific revenue goal, right? Us as entrepreneurs, we got to a specific level and we got excited about it, right? And then like at the end, we're like, okay, I want more, because we never become satisfied. And this is the thing, something that happens a lot to people, like, and then they get to their weight goals and what happens, right? So biggest like rates of depression actually are in like endurance athletes, particularly Ironman athletes after they finish a race the next day. Why? Because they work so hard towards a specific goal. And when they finally cross the finish line, like they get the excitement, the fulfillment for 10 minutes. And the day after, they're like, now what do I do? Yeah. Right? Because they never understood why they were doing it in the first place. So you have to, I always like tell our clients, like you have to, first of all, love yourself at every stage, learn to enjoy this journey and understanding why you're doing it in the first place. And also understanding, okay, what's going to happen and how is my life going to be different at that point? And learning to be complacent when you get to that point and saying like, I got here and I'm happy and this is exactly what I wanted. And I think that's a big kind of issue that a lot of times people think and they have, which is like, okay, I want to lose the 40 pounds. You know, why in the hell do you want to lose 40 pounds? Because this, why until you can't answer that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a good point, because I think a lot of people, because of weight stigma and because of, certain terminology, even the term obesity is pretty skewed in the sense that some people, if you're going by BMI, that's a little bit tricky. Even body fat percentage, like you're still would be considered in the obese category. But I think it's just important to say, and I kind of wanted to mention this earlier, your genetics do play a role. So your genetics, I interviewed someone says that your genes are not your destiny. You can change. So if you are fall in one category, you can switch. But if you're in one category and you're trying to aim to like the normal category, I also talk about this in my book, like for some people that might you have to ask yourself, like, what's realistic for me? And am I trying to chase this number because like, that's what my doctor told me to do based off of nothing other than the number, or is it true? Maybe you have had elevated blood sugars and you have had elevated cholesterol, and some weight reduction will help with that. Then that's, that's a why that we can work with. But if it's just to look like based off of like what the media has portrayed as perfection, which I'm using air quotes because there's no such thing, we have to have a deeper conversation around that. So I think knowing the real reason why, you can have an aesthetic goal, but it has to go deeper than that. It can't just be about aesthetics. There has to be a bigger and deeper reason than that. We have to make sure it's coming from a place that is almost like you said, Andres, like it's because you love yourself. It's because you can. It's from like an empowering place, not from like I'll be happy when place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. This is such a good conversation. I'm so excited. I'm so glad you guys got to come on here today. Before we wrap up and just let people know where they can find you for the last time. Anything else we feel like we should kind of chat about today, leave the listeners with? Any other like last words of wisdom?
I mean, I would just base the last thing that I want to say. I think
we have enough information too.
Yeah, I was going to say, just base it off what Andres had said. Like you have to dive deeper. You have to go deeper than surface level, because I think that, and I don't know how you all feel about this, and you all might feel differently. I think that as we are learning to build our businesses, there's a tagline that we would say, like, you didn't fail the program failed you. I'm at a point now where I'm starting to understand behavior a little bit more. Like, no, it's okay to take some ownership. right? So if you wanted something fast and quick, of course, Optavia didn't work, or of course, something else didn't work because of the mind state that you were at. But if you can go below surface level and go into deeper, like, why do I want this? That's where you're going to find the right mentor. You're going to find the right community. You're going to find the right people around you that are going to keep you going. Because I said this in one of my podcasts a couple of weeks ago, because it kind of just came to me in a meditation. I was like, for most people, like, I want you to choose frustration over quitting, because most people will choose quitting and not be okay with frustration. So again, I would base it off of what Andres said here. Give it some time and go deeper than surface level. It can't just be body comp specific. It can't, because it's surface level. And at some point that surface is going to break and then you're left with you. And I think it's Henry David Thoreau said it, wherever you go, there you are. It's the same damn thing here.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let's do one last roundabout. Where can people find you? Alix, your Instagram again?
Yes, my Instagram, Alix Turoff _RD. And then the link in my bio takes you everywhere you need to go.
Amazing. Des, where can people find you?
Al, I like that. I'm just going to say that. So at Dezi Abeyta, link in bio could take you to recent book that got released this past year, podcasts, anything that I'm a part of, I put in there. I like that, Al. It's way easier to say.
Definitely.
I follow suit at Andres Ayesta, and go to the link in bio. You're going to find everything that you need to find in there.
That's so much easier to say.
How to join our program.
And if you don't have Instagram, though, just Google our names, and all of us have pretty good SEO, it'll come up.
Yeah, definitely.
Honestly, like literally, that's where you're gonna be able to find the podcast, like all like the applications to work with us, all those different things in there too. So that's awesome.
Amazing. Oh, thank you guys for being here. Definitely give them a follow. When it comes to a healthy lifestyle and going about your goals in a sustainable way, in a realistic way, in a healthy and balanced way, you need to be surrounding yourself with people who are either doing that or are kind of there already. So these people are doing that, are there, and are teaching people how to get there. So make sure you're following accounts like Alix does and Andres on Instagram. Make sure you're listening to their podcast, because you constantly, if you don't put in that information in your head, you're going to soak in the BS, the news, the diet culture, all the things, right? So we want to make sure that you're being proactive and actively following accounts like these. And then anything that you see that you don't like, that is triggering, you unfollow those accounts. You don't need to listen to that. Just, ignore it and, move on. So make sure you're following them. If you like this episode, please take a screenshot of it and tag us on your story. I'm at tips_with_Tony or the Tips with Tony podcast. And I'll put all of their links in the show notes. If you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out Tuesdays and Thursdays. And when you are subscribed, you don't miss a beat. And get my book, Once Upon a Diet, now on Amazon. Woo! I'll link that in the show notes too.
So
thank you guys so much for being here. As always, this is Tony Marinici, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.